Based on the technology, the open source technology and the strength of the network, I don't think you could replicate another Bitcoin. It's just not going to happen. It's Bitcoin has the dominance. You and I could go and make a copy of Bitcoin today and try to get it into the popular consciousness, but it's just not going to happen. It'll never win against the original network. If you want to go full Bitcoin, and you want to keep your money in Bitcoin, which I basically did. I sold my house, moved to a rental, went all in on Bitcoin. You do need to make sure you have cash flow. That you're making an income. Otherwise, you're going to be selling your Bitcoin. I still remember that time when the 2017 bull run happened, and there was that incredible parabolic move.
Right.
And I think my account. I looked one day, on my Coinbase account, and I had the equivalent of like $800 in it. And then the next day it was double, and I was like, "What the hell is going on?"
Right.
And so then I kind of really started to pay attention. I do think that the price is a great marketer for Bitcoin.
It's starting to look like this Bitcoin thing is here to stay.
Welcome to the Why Bitcoin Wins podcast, brought to you by Beaver Bitcoin, which is the easiest way to buy Bitcoin in Canada, whether you're buying it for yourself or you're buying it for your company's treasury. Go to beaverbitcoin.com and check it out today. Today I'm joined by John, a Canadian Bitcoiner who has spent several years building companies on the Bitcoin standard. He is currently Chief Innovation Officer at Block Rewards. Welcome to the pod, John.
Thanks, Shravan. Thanks for having me.
Thanks for coming here, and thanks for being here. So the way we're going to do this, John, is I'm going to ask you a few questions, and you can go as deep into them as you like. And the name of this podcast is Why Bitcoin Wins. So we like to go deep with guests into why they think Bitcoin wins. And the best place to start is your origin story. So, John, why does Bitcoin win?
Yeah, no, thanks, Shravan. Yeah, I mean, I'll start way back because I do think my conviction in Bitcoin started from when I started into software, which was actually the late 90s. Before that, in the 90s, I studied architecture at University of Waterloo. Started there because I always loved building and creating. And that was obviously in the physical realm. And then late 90s, it was the rise of the internet, the dot-com boom. I had a friend who wanted to start a web application company, and so I sort of took a left turn and started into software. And back in the late '90s, early 2000s, the internet was a very different place. Basically everything was just people. There was no social media. It was all just about people putting up brochure websites. Applications were just starting on the web, and so it was a really interesting, fun time to get started building. And so I decided it was easier. It was more interesting to build in the digital realm than in the physical. And we ended up building a CRM for the financial services industry in Canada. And back then you were building very alone. You didn't have all the software services to build on top of. We basically built a web framework from scratch in order to get the application up and running. In fact, our first office didn't have an internet connection when we moved in. Our first internet connection was a dial-up modem, and so it was a very different time. But soon after that, email was already very popular, and then kind of the iPhone moment, mobile, and then things like photos began to fall. Everything became digital. Video started to fall. But one of the things that I learned very very early on when we were building our CRM application was that there was a payments problem on the internet. We were it was super interesting to be able to build on the internet in this kind of new field, open field. But then if you wanted to send money over the internet, it was basically impossible back then. PayPal was starting, but it was still, it wasn't real money. It was just, transferring bank dollars. And so, it was very clear that there was a sort of a payments problem on the internet. When we built our applications, it was basically all just, everything was internet native. And then, anytime you actually had to transact in anything of value, then, had to go back to the banking system. And I just remember back then thinking, like, why can't we have an internet native money? And then also came to realize why it was a real problem. And so to get to your, the question, why Bitcoin wins, it was really, I think it was around 2016 when I really started to pay attention to Bitcoin, and the fact that it solved the double spending problem, the Byzantine generals problem, which was had been posed since 1982. People were trying to solve the problem, and Satoshi did it in 2009. And so really, it was me understanding that Bitcoin solved, internet native money, and so that's to me the core of it. I always think about the internet as a whole bunch of copies of things. So whenever I want to see, a podcast or an article, you're pulling a copy of it to your own computer. And so basically, the internet is a whole series of copies. Well, copies don't work in money. You need to have something that you're actually passing around, and the combination of the blockchain and proof of work, and just the Bitcoin network itself solves for that. So really, it's, to me, nothing else has kind of superseded it, and it's really the world's best chance at internet native money.
Super interesting. So you figured out that the world was moving to digital, and you realized that every time you want to make a payment, you had to go analog to some degree, and you realized the need for internet native currency, internet native money, and then something happened in 2016, and you
Yeah.
learned about Bitcoin. What happened in 2016?
Yeah, it was interesting because, so I was running this software company, and I always kind of read the tech news of the day, and I guess it was in the advance of the 2017 bull run. Bitcoin started to get talked about a bit more, and just just like everybody, I was very skeptical at first. And then there was just something that I couldn't put down. I kept kind of researching it, um, and essentially, the hardest thing back then was to find good resources on Bitcoin, because there was so much crap out there, as there is today. But there was a lot less signal back then, and so I just started researching it. I was going into work, by 2018, 2019. Sort of making sure everything was getting taken care of, but I was researching Bitcoin most of the time. That was kind of the my new passion, and it really felt like a new a new field, just like the internet itself was kind of an open field. So I just became very fascinated with it. Bought a little bit, tried to understand it. Probably went down the shitcoin route a little bit. I remember back in the day, I was on Coinbase, and they were putting up videos about learning about all the different types, and then it just started to kind of click that Bitcoin was going to be the one that would win, and that the other ones were sort of, they were not going to supersede it. And then one thing that was interesting is, something that clicked with me with our old software was we basically built a CRM that was for salespeople to use in their daily lives. They were booking their sales meetings, their appointments, all their calls in our software, and basically spending their day, in our software. And so what we started to do was to build a bunch of dashboards that showed, how much the salespeople were using our software. And salespeople love leaderboards. They love, sort of to compete and to be recognized. And so, one of our most used screens was basically this leaderboard that showed, who was making the most phone calls, who was making the most appointments, who was making the most sales, the best ROI on their time, etc. And they just loved it. And it was basically just a leaderboard that was a bunch of numbers on a screen that didn't mean anything. And so one of the first things that really clicked for me was to imagine that instead of this just being, a made up number that's a score, why don't you actually make it into money? And so that's kind of how I started to come up with the idea that I built with Block Rewards, which is kind of a rewards product where eventually we're looking at connecting it into CRMs, and so that as people start to do activity, complete tasks, make sales, they're rewarded with little bits of Bitcoin. Right. And that's kind of that little dopamine release that keeps you motivated.
Interesting. So you first read about Bitcoin in 2016, and then at some point in 2018, 2019 is when you got to actually buying your first sats. Is that right?
Yeah, no, I actually did. I bought it late 2016, I think.
Okay.
But I really didn't have a lot of conviction. It was kind of like, oh, this is really interesting. How do I do this? I like to learn by doing things. And so, it was basically like open up a Coinbase account, and, put a few $100s in. And I still remember that time when the 2017 bull run happened, and there was that incredible parabolic move.
Right.
And I think my account, I looked one day, on my Coinbase account, and I had, the equivalent of like $800 in it. And then the next day it was double. And I was like, what the hell is going on?
Right.
And so then I kind of, really started to pay attention. I do think that the price is a great marketer for Bitcoin.
Absolutely.
And then, it was also interesting because at that time, that was also when the fork happened, the fork wars happened.
Right.
And so I remember getting I remember getting a fork of Bitcoin Cash into my Coinbase account, and then and then seeing these two Bitcoins in my account, and just then I started had to learn further about what was going on there. I was fortunate enough to kind of get enough signal to say, hey, let's move this Bitcoin Cash into Bitcoin because it wasn't looking as good. But yeah, so basically, I've been holding since then, slowly accumulating. Basically, I mean, I left or I exited that company in 2020 to kind of start researching Bitcoin further. I worked in a couple of early Bitcoin startups, and started running a node. And I think Aubrey, the CEO, was one of the first Bitcoiners I actually reached out on Bitcoin Twitter to kind of make this thing more of a reality rather than just magic internet money.
Yeah, Aubrey told me that you were one of Beaver's first customers.
Yeah, that's right. Yeah, yeah. No, using it on when the software was super new, and yeah, it's a great product, and still I love it today, and it keeps getting better and better.
Love to hear that. So it's now 2026. We're recording on Jan 28th, 2026. So what is it about Bitcoin that, in your opinion, makes it worthy of being the internet's native money? You mentioned earlier it solves the double spending problem. Is that the main reason, or is there another big reason why you still believe today in 2026?
Yeah, I mean, it's a good question. I think that for a lot of people, it could be a very confusing world out there because there are so many altcoins, and the rise of stablecoins, and how stablecoins are effectively being kind of adopted by the U.S. government. I mean, obviously, the Bitcoin's in the conversation there. But I mean, to me, it's still the only one that is a trustless, permissionless, absolutely scarce or absolutely finite, um, and based on the technology, the open source technology, and the strength of the network, I don't think you could replicate another Bitcoin. It's just not going to happen. It's Bitcoin has the dominance. You and I could go and make a copy of Bitcoin today and try to get it into the popular consciousness, but it's just not going to happen. It'll never win against the original network. It's kind of like what people say. It's you can make another game of chess with a slightly different set of rules, but no one's going to bother learning how to play it. And so, to me, Bitcoin has won. But I think it's still an interesting question, especially today for people who are learning about digital assets. Why will Bitcoin win over let's say the advent of like stable coins, and because I think the U.S. dollar is a very attractive thing around the world. But really, it comes down to this kind of boiling pot that we're all living in, with inflation, and I think it's going to hit. People know it's happening, but they're sort of complacent in it, and essentially, people are going to start to realize that they need to save their money in something better. And so I think over time, Bitcoin will win that way.
So, John, today, Jan 28th, 2026, we're looking at Bitcoin flat or down over the last year. Gold is up like 85, 90%. Silver's up 260%. You mentioned Bitcoin will eventually be the thing that helps you the most from an inflation perspective. But are you looking at these different precious metals and different inflation hedges, and feeling tempted to get into those, or do you still believe that Bitcoin is, the best inflation protection, and um, it's just a matter of the fact that the price hasn't caught up?
Yeah, no, that's a great question. I would admit to having a bit of gold and silver FOMO, to be honest. It's impressive to see what they've done.
Hmm.
And when I was learning about Bitcoin, I was a gold investor, a little bit. So the gold and the gold proposition makes a lot of sense to me. Silver less so, because it's much less finite. But the thing is that's interesting about silver that they talk about is kind of this lack of physical supply, where there's lots of trading of paper silver, but there's eventually the silver has to kind of reconcile. So I do think it's interesting. Um, but what I would say is that the rise of silver and gold shows that people are losing confidence in the dollar, in fiat currencies.
Or have already
Uh,
lost?
yeah, or have already lost. Yeah, I mean, lots of people have already lost. And that's kind of the first place that they're going to go, if they're not understanding Bitcoin. One thing, I think Bitcoin is very opaque. It's very hard to learn about. You really need curiosity. You need an open mind. You need to kind of unlearn the things you learned about money in the fiat world, and it's a lot of people don't have the time or the energy to kind of do that. So, people going into gold, going into silver makes a lot of sense. But it's interesting, Shravan, because talking to people in the financial services industry, here and in the U.S., more and more people, 5 years ago, they'd kind of laugh at Bitcoin. They wouldn't take it too seriously. But now you meet these people who are working as, in wealth management, financial planning, um, lawyers, all sorts of people in the financial industry, and they all have had touch points with Bitcoin. So you can see that the dominoes are definitely toppling. It's not happening at a super huge rate right now, but I do think that everyone's starting to get a little bit more familiar with it. And the rise of the Bitcoin treasury kind of trend, it's not been as everything that everyone thought it could be, but it definitely has made. I talk to people downtown Toronto, who are kind of in TradFi, and these people, they recently set up a small Bitcoin treasury for their company, or someone's on the board of directors of Hut 8 or something like that. So everyone's starting to get a little used to Bitcoin, and so when the pain hits, and with sort of loss of confidence in dollars, I think that more and more people look to Bitcoin.
Yeah, I think what's really ironic about gold and silver is that any investor I speak to who believes in gold and silver say that they believe in it because it's physical and they can touch it, but then they actually go and buy paper gold and paper silver because they're like, there's no way I can take possession of the amount of silver and gold that I want to buy, which is so ironic. And guess what fixes that? Bitcoin. Right? So, you can have self custody of literally any amount that you can possibly think of. And beaverbitcoin.com can help you get it if you're in Canada. So, there you go. Um, so, John, how did you go about, going from I believe in Bitcoin to I want to work in Bitcoin?
Yeah, great question. I mean, I kind of have always had, uh, I've always gone where my interest lies, and I just, back then, Bitcoin was all I thought about. And just like when I left architecture, all my thoughts were about the rise of the internet. So I kind of knew I needed to, put my money where my mouth was, um, and so, I just started going to the conferences, going to meetups as much as possible, and basically, I was trying to kind of take what I'd learned from my previous business and turn it into Bitcoin. But there's not, you really need to go back to first principles with Bitcoin and build from that. You can't just sort of turn, your old TradFi app into Bitcoin. So I started working at a couple of startups, and just that was where the work that was most exciting to me was. So I just kind of was drawn to that.
So, what was your first Bitcoin company?
Yeah, so I joined a company called Bold Bitcoin. Maybe is it 3 or 4 years ago now, and it was just at the start of their when they had just started. They're no longer sort of doing this, but they were trying to build a Bitcoin credit card. And so you'd basically put up your Bitcoin, and that would give you a basically like a Visa line of credit in a sense, and you could spend against it like a credit card. Um, but that lasted for a while. But essentially in the crypto, what do they call it? Like when they basically went after all the banks who were dealing with crypto companies, the Operation Choke Point 2.0 kind of stuff. Basically, all of our potential bank partners just had to stop any kind of operations with us. So that kind of they then had to pivot, and we parted ways. Um, so yeah, so I've just tried to work with as many startups as possible in advisory roles. And eventually I came to kind of develop my own idea for a Bitcoin business, which I ended up calling it Motivate, but I ended up getting acquired by Block Rewards to build it with them, and so that's kind of was the next chapter.
Awesome. I didn't know that story. Can you share the story with us? How did that happen?
Yeah, I mean, it was interesting because as I was talking about that screen and the leaderboards with my previous, with my earlier business, I basically, kind of came up with a Bitcoin rewards app. It's what's amazing about Bitcoin is you can send, $2 of it. You can essentially stream it over the Lightning Network, and so, I just thought that if it would be the greatest motivator if you were interested in Bitcoin and you got rewarded with Bitcoin for doing your job. So essentially, I kind of just developed it and started pitching it, and then met Scott, and we basically because Block Rewards' mission is to serve businesses who want to pay people in Bitcoin, reward them, retain talent based on it, attract talent. So essentially, we had the same niche, and so we decided to build together.
Very cool.
Yeah.
So, John, what would your advice be for someone who's trying to get a job at a Bitcoin company?
Yeah, I mean, good question. I will say, as a word of warning, like if you want to go full Bitcoin, and you want to keep your money in Bitcoin, which I basically did. I sold my house, moved to a rental, went all in on Bitcoin. You do need to make sure you have cash flow. That you're making an income. Otherwise, you're going to be selling your Bitcoin, and so I kind of jumped into trying to go full time Bitcoin, and there's lots of work in Bitcoin, and it's a growing industry, but it's not always easy to translate your skills, and so you really need to get into the industry by going to these conferences, meeting people. I just spent days and days just learning about Bitcoin businesses. I remember, back in 2018, 2019, learning about bull Bitcoin, and just being fascinated with the podcasts and everything I would read about it. And you just start to learn about it through applying to different jobs. But yeah, it's not like you can just kind of quickly translate your skills into Bitcoin. There's definitely a transition period.
How do you feel about, proof of work versus fiat's system? So with fiat, it feels more like your monthly salary regardless of output versus do you feel in Bitcoin it's more proof of work? Is that something that you've seen in action working with all of these different Bitcoin companies? Because Bitcoiners think differently.
Yeah, definitely. I mean, one thing that's amazing about working at Bitcoin is you're generally surrounded by other people who are interested in the same thing. Your values are very aligned. People, you kind of already start to, even before meeting people who are already into Bitcoin, you have so much common knowledge and kind of common goals. So working in a Bitcoin business is very rewarding. Um, I do think, I would just say that, talk to as many people as you can. Um, Definitely, when we're looking at resumes and things like that, proof of work, means something. You get a lot of people who apply for jobs, and in the fiat world, they just kind of throw their resume together. In Bitcoin, I think you do need to show proof of work. There are so many people who are interested in working in the industry that it becomes very competitive. And whether it's I remember like whether it's just setting up your own node, learning about it by doing. That's those things are really important.
You mentioned you run your own node.
Yeah, actually, I just finished a renovation, so it's been offline for a bit. I got to get it back online. I put together an old Raspberry Pi a long time ago, back when you kind of build it yourself, and I need to plug that back in.
So you finish a renovation, but you said you don't own real estate.
No, that's so I moved in with my girlfriend,
Okay.
and she owns a condo,
Okay.
and we just renovated it. So yeah,
Okay.
so
Okay.
so my so
Right.
so so I'm on the Bitcoin side, and she's more on the traditional side, and
Right.
together it kind of works pretty well.
Right. Yeah, that works very well. I used to work at Google, and my wife still works at Google, so that works out very well.
Yeah.
Um, so, what do you focus on as chief innovation officer at Block Rewards? What does that mean, and what does your day to day look like?
Yeah, I mean, it's mostly on the product side, and we use a lot of AI in our product development. So we're using AI to build sort of the next generation of our software, specifically using Claude Code to build prototypes of the software we want to build. I mean, back in the day, you'd be drawing on a whiteboard, sketches and diagrams and things like that, and there were so many obstacles to getting towards software. It was so expensive, and it was very difficult for people to kind of get a feel for it until it was built. But that took a lot of resources. Um, So today, we're working on using AI to basically build like a prototype of the software we want to release. And that really is incredible because you get to play with it, you get to really learn what it's going to be like, even though it may not be production ready. You can put it in front of investors, and you can really learn the intricacies of what you're building. And then the process of handing that over to a dev team is so much easier than kind of starting from scratch with just a bunch of sketches. So I do a lot of that. I also find any of the difficult problems that we tackle as a company. I'm kind of involved in because there's a lot of AI use. We're looking into how to expand into the U.S. We're looking into compliance and regulation, and I'm no lawyer or a compliance officer, but with some of these deep research tools, you can really learn anything very, very quickly, and then also sort of use it to kind of hatch a plan to tackle them. So the innovation side is really just about using technology to solve problems as best as possible. And AI kind of can become it can become a very useful business tool, throughout a company. So that's kind of a lot of my mission.
What are you most excited about building in 2026?
Um, yeah, I mean, I follow Bitcoin. I love, there's lots of interesting advances in Bitcoin. Um, but it's interesting how Bitcoin and AI really kind of work very well together. And I really, I don't know whether it's the new algorithm that they've got on X or whatever, but it seems like most of the interesting stuff these days that comes up on my feed is sort of AI related. So,
Hmm.
there's I don't know if you've been seeing on X, they have there's this new software called Claude Bot, or it's they had to change the name to Molt Bot, but I'm interested in sort of installing that and playing with that. Basically an AI with some persistent memory, which seems to solve a big problem with the current AI. So, I love to play with new technology, and kind of get on the bleeding edge. And then, it's sort of that space between bleeding edge technology and then actually useful technology that I like to play in. So a lot of that is today in the different AI models.
Hmm. Yeah, Sailor often says that he comes up with these digital credit products using AI.
Yeah, yeah. I mean, that was very validating for me because I had just started using ChatGPT Deep Research, and I was just absolutely blown away by it, and just kind of the ability to get your head around a problem that you really had no clue about. It
Hmm.
gives you incredible context, and then yeah, he started talking about how he was using it to create these different products, and it makes perfect sense because it's you just can lean on it for so much knowledge, um, and it used properly, it really can 10x your productivity.
For sure, it's pretty amazing. It's an amazing thought partner for sure. And to think that something like STRC was born on AI is pretty incredible, right?
Yeah,
You're seeing 11% yields compared to, bonds which are giving you 4 or 5%. So that
yeah,
is
no,
unbelievable.
100%. And a lot of what he was talking about was kind of navigating the regulatory environment, and you know, um, so many people in compliance and legal, they don't want to touch anything that's different and new, and you kind of all this gives founders and innovators a real way to kind of get into that space without having to be a kind of a career expert at it. So, yeah, I mean, it's whether you're traveling to a new city, like I was just recently in Mexico City. You can really dig deep on anything with AI, and it becomes incredibly useful in your daily life as well.
Nice. Mexico City is amazing. Was it your first time?
It was my first time, yeah, and absolutely amazing. What a beautiful city, and pretty amazing to go in January. To kind of explore an incredible urban landscape in January with some sun. So it was excellent.
Absolutely. And then you came back to all the snow.
Yeah.
Uh, okay, John. So that is the end of my big questions for you. Now we've reached my favorite part of this show, which is called the lightning round. And the rule is very simple. It just needs to be your first impulsive response. It can be one word, it can be a sentence, whatever you like. Okay?
Cool. Yep.
Are you ready?
I am.
All right, let's go. Okay, John, what's your Bitcoin price prediction in 2026?
I think I could hit 150,
Okay,
150K. Yep.
USD.
USD. Yep.
Okay, okay. Would you rather get a monthly salary or Satoshis per task?
Interesting. Personally, a salary. Personally, a salary. I think that there are lots of people who grind it who would be way better on tasks, and they're very task oriented. But I'm a salary guy, I'd say.
Fair. Is it easier to orange pill family and friends or business owners?
Um, Good question. I mean, I do think that there's a lot of trust, and it's very difficult, different approaches for those people. Um, I've had better success with business owners than
Business owner.
family, to be honest. But that might be of my own situation. I don't know.
Right. Okay. Most underappreciated Bitcoin company.
Interesting, interesting. I mean, I go to those guys like the Amboss and Jesse Schrader. What's his company? I'm blanking right now. All the Lightning companies. I think that they're very underrated. And so yeah, I'd go with that.
I think Scott also said Amboss when I asked him that question.
Yeah, yeah. I think that Lightning's getting a lot of shade these days, and we're in the Lightning round, so I'm gonna rep that. So it's these people building the layer twos on Bitcoin for sure.
Cool. All right. Uh, John, what's your first word that comes to your mind when I say the following names? Mark Carney,
Clown,
Michael Saylor,
genius,
Donald Trump,
grifter.
Peter Thiel,
Um, there's a better word, but I'm gonna say revolutionary.
Jeff Booth,
Um, wisdom.
Great. All right, John. That's it. That's the end of the lightning round. You passed
Nice.
with flying colors.
Nice.
Congratulations. Um, I'd love to actually dig in a little more to what you were saying about lightning companies. I'd love to hear more about that.
Yeah, I mean, I think that some of the wind in Lightning Company sales has been sort of taken out because of all this. Because really you need to build up on top of the store of value proposition of Bitcoin to get to the medium of exchange, and then you get to the unit of account. It feels to me like those things follow kind of a sequence, and I think a lot of the medium of exchange hype has kind of gone into stable coins these days. And stable coins, I think that stable coins have an incredible product market fit. Basically like the two main product market fits in Bitcoin or in digital assets are Bitcoin as, kind of digital capital, and then stable coins, really do have a product market fit because people are still tied to kind of fiat currencies, but they need to kind of have the reach. But really, I think that Lightning, Arc, Cashew, all these things are incredible innovations on top of Bitcoin. And once Bitcoin, does win, and Bitcoin kind of gets the kind of gets into the collective consciousness, then people will want to transact on it. So I think that the Lightning companies these days are building incredibly important software, and I'd love to see a focus back on that. But it does feel like sort of people transacting in stable coins kind of has kind of taken some of the attention away from them. Yeah.
That's very interesting. Yeah, when I was in El Salvador, I was paying for everything over Lightning, and that was an unbelievable experience in a medium of exchange. Felt like the future.
Totally. Yeah. No, it's amazing. I mean, if you're sending sats around the world, it's a pretty amazing feeling.
Absolutely. John, thank you so much for joining the Why Bitcoin Wins podcast. Do you have any closing thoughts for people? What do you want people to remember?
Yeah, thanks, Shravan. Yeah, no, thanks for listening. You can check us out at blockrewards.com. I'm on Twitter, and yeah, it's just been great to be here. Thanks so much.
Great. How do people follow you? What's your you know
My handle on
handle?
Twitter on X is my name. Sorry, it's John 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 underscore Ely, which is ELY underscore 21M. Bit of a difficult handle, but
There you
but you
go.
can you can find me, I'm sure.
100%. Great. Thank you, John.
Okay, thanks, Shravan. Have a great day.
You too.
Bye.